Hi, my name is Kwan, and my topic is about vape pens and how they affect the body. In with smoking transversing from regular tobacco cigarettes to vape pens is becoming more popular in today's generation. In order to better society and prevent younger kids from being able to get their hands on vape pens, I would suggest implementing in our education on how it might affect the body, as well as petitioning for a higher age restriction on vape pens. Many of you might have a family member or a relative that smokes, so you could easily understand how it is having to deal with a family member that isn't taking care of their health or are making themselves vulnerable to nicotine and tobacco or vaping. I, for one, have had an experience of having a family member smoking, and having them to be able to kick the habit is very difficult and it takes time. And in order to prevent this for the younger generation moving forward would be to implement it, and more so in our educational system, and even petitioning for the age to be restricted at a higher age so that they won't be able to affect their bodies long term and be able to make their own decisions of whether or not they want to smoke. First, I will dive into how vape pens will affect the body. Based off of the Journal of American Heart Association, they tell you that the pulmonary tract is directly the main system that is affected in the body when smoking e-cigarettes or vaping or having nicotine in your body. It also affects the immune system. It affects your respiratory system and all the organs that make up the respiratory system, and it could also raise your blood pressure and affect your central nervous system. These things are very important because it affects your body long term, and smoking long term could also be unhealthy for your body and also open up your body to be vulnerable to specific diseases. More so, in order to prevent these diseases and bodily effects from happening, we could implement it in our educational system. We could implement it in our educational system, and we could also petition against it. By petitioning against it and by implementing it in our education system, the grade school students and underage kids will be more aware and more present in being capable of making their own decisions of whether or not they want to smoke at all when they're in a public setting or when they're with friends, or they feel like they're being pressured to smoke because of vape culture. Aside from this, you might see or might be at the casino area and you might see a lot of people smoking, and you're unable to deal with the fumes, and these fumes is secondhand smoking, and you're dealing with secondhand smoking every time you go into the strip if you live in Las Vegas. In order to better ourselves, we can even be courteous to the people around that we surround ourselves if this person does smoke. In order to implement smoking education, we could implement it in our school system, have volunteers such as college students, or it could be groups or factions that primarily talk about how drugs or even tobacco and nicotine affect the body, and bring them in and have them do a PowerPoint and teach the younger generation on how it affects the respiratory system, how it affects the cardiovascular system, how it affects your immune system, your central nervous system, and have them talk about it. As based on the Journal of Heart American Association, they also speak about how it affects the cardiovascular system and break down how e-cigarettes are maybe slightly less harmful than regular traditional cigarettes, but just as easily you're just as easily susceptible to how it might harm the body. Now imagine this. you live in a world where people are aware of how cigarettes, how vaping, e-cigarettes affect the body, and these kids can easily make a judgment based on what they know because their school provides a certain day or a certain time in which they have guest speakers come in and speak about how vaping might affect the body, how it might affect your cardiovascular system and respiratory system. With this implemented, we can better our younger generation and even better our society in changing the habit of people giving into vape culture, giving into culture that could worsen the health long term for kids that weren't very knowledgeable on it from the beginning. And imagine this, imagine younger kids not knowing what they're getting themselves into, just diving right in with friends who may have a vape pen on hand, and they just want to indulge in something that they don't fully know or have gained knowledge on, and then they affect their body in the worst possible way long term. And so it's good in contrast, in comparing and contrasting these two different realities. Where do you see yourself? Like, where do you see yourself and where do you see your loved ones, and how do you want to go about this situation, and how do you want to better this situation yourself? And obviously it would be better to educate the younger generation, educate your loved ones and your younger siblings or your younger cousins or family members on how it might affect the body. To close, I'd like to go over everything that we've spoken of thus far. We've spoken about how vaping and e-cigarettes have become substantially more popular in today's generation, and how it's pertinent that we educate and provide education for such things, as well as implement maybe a petition of sorts so that we get the age at a higher restriction, so that it's less accessible to underage kids, and how we visualize the difference between whether or not you would want a reality in where the students are aware, grade school students are aware, or underage kids, or a reality where people aren't aware and they're just indulging in smoking and not helping themselves for the better. And I think the call to action here is to realize that in the long run, who do you see yourself as, and where do you want to be, and how do you want your loved ones to be affected when it's too late, and we make this decision too late when it's already present in our bodies and our system.